Hi there. It's September the 24th, and we're continuing our journey through the prophecies of Isaiah, in Hebrew Yeshayahu, the Lord will save. We're going from chapter 43, verse 14, through to chapter 45 and verse 10. So in the balance of chapter 43, there's reference here to the Lord bringing down the nobles of Babylon. And actually, in the bringing down the nobles of Babylon, it's going to be like a new exodus. It's going to be a new bringing through the sea, as it were. There's going to be a new bringing into a place of communion and fellowship with God. In fact, the Lord says, look, I'm going to do a new thing. Hadashah in Hebrew, I'm doing a new thing. Do you not see it springing forth? There's going to be rivers in the wilderness. There's going to be water in the desert. Just like the Lord provided water for his people in the desert in Sinai, so he's going to provide water in the wilderness in this new Exodus. He says, I formed you for myself. And despite their many sins, he's going to blot those sins out. He's going to be the forgiving God. He's going to restore Jacob. He's going to restore Jerusalem for himself. And then in chapter 44, he says that he's going to help Jacob. He's going to be Jacob's redeemer. He's going to pour water. Again, he says, I'm going to pour water on the thirsty ground. It's interesting that he uses, Isaiah uses quite a bit in these chapters, the term Jacob, Yaakov, for Israel, because of course Jacob was Israel's name before he was changed by his encounter with the angel. And Jacob also means that one who is constantly ducking and diving, constantly trying to find a way through, constantly trying to get his own way. And so there's a sense in which this name Jacob is being used of an Israel who is fighting God all the time. But he says that I will pour out water on thirsty ground. In fact, I will pour out my spirit on your seed, he says. Then he says very familiar words, I am the first and last, in verse 6 of chapter 44. I'm the first and the last. I'm the beginning and the end, the author and the finish of everything. But then he talks about the fact that the nations and even people in Judah have been worshipping non-gods. And there's a pointing out by Isaiah of the foolishness of this worship of idols, men making their own molten metal non-gods. And in fact, he says they use the same wood for baking their bread and then for smelting an idol and worshipping it and saying, deliver us. And just the foolishness of that. He says, because I, the Lord myself, am your Redeemer. And then right in the last verse of chapter 44, God introduces, Isaiah, through God's Spirit, introduces the name of the deliverer who is going to overturn the Babylonian captive and is going to see this new exodus happen. And he is Cyrus of Persia. Cyrus, who is going to be the one who overwhelms Babylon, and where Babylon has exiled the people and taken them away and deported them to Babylon, Cyrus is going to allow there to be a return of the exiles. And so in chapter 45, Cyrus is seen as God's anointed one. He's actually called the Mashiach, interestingly enough. He's the one in history that God has anointed to bring back the people, to allow the people to come back. He will be given the treasures of darkness. But actually it's not Cyrus that does it. The people recognize that it is God. It's the Lord who's done it. And actually he is the one who will restore, and he will establish the temple anew. And the last couple of verses are famous verses from Isaiah saying, can the clay argue with the maker, or can the child argue with the mother and say, what are you doing? How did you make me? All this, we're clear, is in the hands of the Lord, who, as we saw in chapter 44, says, I am the first and the last. It's very clear here from Isaiah's these chapters, Isaiah 43 to 45, that the Lord is very much in control of the situation. His purpose is to restore his people. Whatever they go through in their exile in Babylon, God is intending through Cyrus, his anointed one, to restore them to their land and to establish Judah as being a praise in all the earth. We are still receiving the blessings and the benefits of that redemption through Jesus Messiah, who by his cross, by his resurrection, has brought us into the commonwealth of Israel. So we rejoice today that we are part of this story of restoration and redemption. Have a very good September 24th.